today we're going to focus on some stuff that Vicky's done with the shelter, for the shelter, and learn a bit about the shelter itself as we showcase what it is that makes the shelter so special. The first thing I'm going to ask you today, Vicky, is what is your position in regards to the shelter?
So first and foremost for the shelter, I am a volunteer. There's a crew of about 70 volunteers. I am one of them, but I am likely the longest standing volunteer that the shelter has. I started back in 2014.
Wow. So we're looking at 10 years then, right?
10 years this July.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a huge milestone, both for you and for the shelter.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you start at the animal shelter?
Well, I had come from a corporate environment. I had a corporate job. I was an chief financial officer for a technology company. The company was acquired. I found myself odd man out. My daughter was out of school, and I was bumping around the house and said, I really need to find something else to do. So I decided that I would look for volunteer opportunities, and I did come upon, I think it was in social media, a post that said that the animal shelter was looking for volunteers. And I knew about the animal shelter because we had recently adopted a dog, and we had looked at the Marshfield Animal Shelter during the adoption process. We wound up adopting from a different shelter, but still I had some very basic awareness that there was an animal shelter in the town. So I thought that would be a good thing since I had cats and I had a dog, and it just seemed a natural extension of kind of a lifelong commitment to having pets.
So you did mention that your position at the animal shelter is a volunteer position.
Correct.
Would you mind clarifying what entities run the shelter?
Sure. There's actually 3 entities that have a part in the operations of the animal shelter. The animal shelter itself, the Marshfield Animal Shelter, is a municipal shelter, so it's owned by the town of Marshfield. It is operated through the police department's animal control division, so that's party number 2. And then the third party that's involved is actually the Friends of the Marshfield Animal Shelter. Because the shelter is a town entity, they are not able to fundraise, and they are part of the town's operating budget each year. So the operating budget funds animal control resources through the police department, and the operating budget funds the actual facilities costs for the operation of the animal shelter. So that doesn't leave a lot left over for the caretaking of any animals that come through the shelter. So that's where the real need was. So we established the Friends of the Marshfield Animal Shelter to help fundraise and pay for some of the expenses for the daily upkeep of the shelter, as well as veterinary care and medication and food and supplies for the shelter itself.
What are the Friends of the Marshfield Animal Shelter?
So the Friends of the Marshfield Animal Shelter is a 501c3 public charity. So we're recognized by the Internal Revenue Service as being tax exempt and having certain benefits to be able to attract donations, tax-exempt donations and deductible donations, things like that. But it is an all-volunteer organization as well. So we have no paid staff at the Friends of the Marshfield Animal Shelter. No matter what duties and responsibilities we have, it's all on a volunteer basis in our extra spare time. So the Friends of the Marshfield Animal Shelter has a board of directors. It's not a board for the animal shelter, it's a board for the Friends of the Marshfield Animal Shelter. So we make decisions on funding certain activities at the shelter, and we can get into this more later, but like new things for the facility itself, whether it be a cat condo or a dog kennel, or veterinary care if there's a particular animal that's in particular need of very specialized care, such as an ultrasound or a biopsy or things of that nature. The Friends would step in and fund that. We also have funded spay and neuter for the animal shelter, because pet overpopulation is very often a major contributor to animals that find themselves coming into the shelter either as strays, as ferals, or even as surrenders. So that's a very important initiative that the Friends have. Back in the day, I think over the course of my 10 years as a volunteer, I believe they did have the spay wagon, the Animal Rescue League spay wagon, come visit on a couple of occasions. But now there's a local vet that is a low-cost vet that she does spay-neuter procedures for the same price tag as the Animal Rescue League spay wagon.
Wow.
So that's available 2 days a week. On a weekly basis. So there hasn't been as much need for the spay-neuter events, because there's a lot more availability now from private practices. But we do, and actually the shelter does this in collaboration the last couple of years with Marshfield Animal Hospital, a rabies vaccination clinic and a pet microchip clinic. And it's at a reduced cost. So I think the rabies vaccinations were $10, where if you go to your veterinarian, it's usually at least $25 or more. And there's no exam fee. It's open to all towns. Microchips are at a reduced cost as well, which are very important. Cats are little stinkers. They scoot out the door and they go on little excursions for days at a time. And if they're microchipped, they're more easily reunited, as are dogs who take off from the yard when the gate's left open. So microchipping is very important, and the cost of the microchips, I think, was $30. And we try to run those clinics at least once a year in the spring to coincide with the dog licensing requirements, and sometimes twice a year in the spring and the fall.
It sounds like the animal shelter has a lot of resources that they can provide for people, or information about resources?
Yeah, there's a lot of information, and actually the animal shelter and the Friends. The Friends have a website, which is friendsofmarshfieldanimалshelter.org, and there's a resource tab in that in the website that can point you if you're looking for, help paying for veterinary bills or pet food pantries, things like that. But animal control is also very knowledgeable, so if you were to call the shelter, and they could also point you to, other, maybe even other stuff that's not listed on the website that's, not very well known. Like, for example, there's a voucher system that is run by the state of Massachusetts, or I should say the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And that voucher system is for people who are on certain public assistance programs, that they can get a voucher from animal control, take that voucher to a specific provider, and have their animals spayed or neutered for nothing.
Wow. But that's really interesting too, because it also shows that not only do the Friends have information, but the animal control also has information. Mm-hmm. So it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning, that the Friends and animal control in the town kind of really do work together to mm-hmm. keep the shelter going.
Mm-hmm. We also, I think I mentioned fundraising. So we have a series of fundraisers over the years to raise the money that actually goes into providing this assistance to the Marshfield Animal Shelter. Over the years, too, the Friends have evolved into an organization that also helps struggling pet owners. if they are on financial bad times, or their animal has a catastrophic injury that may cost $7,000 at one of the local veterinary practices to have their animal treated, we will very often assist them with the cost of that. We know of other resources in the state of Massachusetts they can call upon, and we'll give them those resources, but we ourselves can also contribute financially up to a limited amount of money towards getting that animal back to health and keeping that animal in its loving home with its pet parents.
Wow. See, that's really special, because clearly that's also the Friends going out of their way for things that might not be considered a duty or a job of an animal shelter.
Right.
Could you go a little bit into the history of the Marshfield Animal Shelter?
Sure. From what I am aware of, there is a plaque at the shelter that dates back to when the shelter first opened, and if I'm not mistaken, that was back in 1991. The shelter was put together and built by a group of people that coincidentally also called themselves the Friends of the Marshfield Animal Shelter, though they never incorporated as we have now. But prior to the shelter opening in 1991, the town used a local kennel down here on Route 3A on Main Street. Brigadoon Kennels actually used to house any animals on behalf of the town. So there was a relationship there. I'm sure there was some type of compensation as well, but that's where the animals stayed. And then when that relationship ended, that's when the need to build the municipal shelter occurred, and this group of volunteers put together the shelter back in 1991, and it opened its doors in those days actually as a kill shelter. So the animals unfortunately were euthanized, as was a common practice for many, many shelters across Massachusetts and across the country back in those times. Since then, the shelter has changed its philosophy. We are a no-kill shelter now, which means that animals that come into the shelter can stay with us forever until they find their new home.
That's wonderful. And I know for a lot of people that's a deciding factor
Yep.
too. When you talk about how the volunteers take on a lot of responsibilities and duties, what are some of those responsibilities that the volunteers will take on?
We have a specific list of tasks that get done. We have 2 volunteer shifts a day, one in the morning and one in late afternoon, and each shift is responsible for checking the donation bin that's outside the shelter door to make sure that generous donations from the community are brought inside and put away where they're best found for later use. And we do laundry, we change bedding, we change litter boxes, we clean out cages. It's all very unglamorous work, unfortunately. We wash dishes, we feed animals, we medicate animals on occasion, sweep floors, wash floors, disinfect and wash cat condos and dog kennels, and exercise the animals out in the side yard for a little while, give the cats in the cat room some floor time to play, stretch their legs, and anything in between. Anything that needs, picking up, tidying, cleaning, sprucing up within the shelter gets done.
Very nice. That's awesome. And now you said there's a morning shift and an afternoon shift. Does that mean people work in some sort of groups or teams when they're there?
Yes, they do work in teams. Because it's a town shelter, one of the rules that we have to abide by is that no one is allowed in the shelter without a companion. It's always the buddy system. So we do have teams. The teams vary from anywhere from 3 people to 5 people who volunteer their time. And that also spreads the work out amongst many hands, so to speak, and gets things done faster because we don't want to fatigue our volunteers. It helps them divvy up the tasks and get things done faster, and it also frees them up to do their tasks so that they can spend time socializing the animals at the end of their shifts.
Are there age limits?
We do allow children to volunteer, but we ask that they volunteer with their parents if they are under the age of 16. We do have a floor that we don't want, toddlers running around for safety reasons. So we ask that anyone who does volunteer with their children, that they be at least 4 or 5 years old, school age preferably, and they can come along with their parents, and some even bring their siblings, and they volunteer as families at the shelter.
It's really cool to hear that there's opportunities for all when it comes to volunteering.
Yeah, and I think we're unique as an animal shelter for allowing school-age children to volunteer with their parents. From what I have heard from parents who are part of our program, those opportunities aren't always easy to come by. Yeah. So we're happy to fulfill that need. And I think it's great to start the kids young to learn what it takes. They want, a lot of times you get parents whose kids want a pet and they volunteer at the shelter. Well, let's go see what it really takes to have a pet, what kind of responsibility it is, and see if you're really still interested after the fact in having this dog, cat, rabbit, bird, guinea pig, whatever the case may be,
Yeah, I think that's a great way both for parents and kids to kind of grasp the responsibility that they're going to be taking on if they do go down that road, which is really, really cool. And I think it's wonderful, the idea of getting school-age kids involved, because that also helps them with their animal socialization, how they know how to greet animals and what's appropriate.
We offer certain shifts to students from area high schools such as Archbishop Williams, and actually there's a volunteer from Norfolk Aggie as well that volunteer at our shelter to fulfill community service hours. So that's, I think it's something important to help the community, help these students get exposure to what it takes to run an animal shelter, and it also, helps them develop some additional skills.
End of part 1. Stay tuned for part 2 to hear more from Vicky and Heather. For more on the shelter, please visit the Friends online or contact Marshfield Animal Control.